The halls of justice in the state of Florida and really nationwide are unfortunately closed to people who can't afford to hire their own attorney. But when you are low income, living in an apartment, living paycheck to paycheck, maybe working 3 jobs just to try to make ends meet, and your landlord decides one day he just wants to raise the rent and you can't afford it, what are you going to do? You have to turn to an organization like Three Rivers to assert your legal rights. And if there aren't people out there doing that work for free, those folks are not going to have representation. They are not going to get through the door to the courthouse.
Three Rivers is a not-for-profit law firm that provides free legal services to clients in 17 counties of North Florida. We provide services regarding civil legal matters, anything that isn't criminal.
Number 1 is housing and consumer law, assisting tenants who rent housing, a lot of home ownership issues, primarily focused on foreclosure. The second is family law, the dissolution of marriage, injunctions for protection against violence, paternity and custody issues that come up primarily for victims of domestic violence. The third is our Heirs Property Project. It ties into housing, but a lot of this includes estate planning as well, valid wills, deeds, and finally, Public Benefits and Veterans Benefits Unit, ensuring that veterans get access to the benefits for their service, ensuring that those families that had to sit through and wait for 2 to 3 years to get those benefits can maintain them and ensure that they have the income they need in the long term.
Whenever there are major life changes, marriages, divorces, births, or deaths, you need to update your estate planning. When you do not have money, you do not have resources, these non-emergency type needs are not at the forefront of your mind. It's only until you have an emergency, you have a foreclosure, your home going to be repossessed. This area of law really impacts a great number of people.
Unfortunately, most people in America, especially low-income individuals, can't afford adequate legal representation or even any legal representation. A 2022 report from the Legal Services Corporation found that 92% of low-income Americans either had no legal representation in their civil issues or were underrepresented.
Without nonprofit legal services like Three Rivers Legal Services, most people would not have representation in court proceedings that are civil in nature unless they paid for it. The base retainer that most private individuals have to pay to an attorney to represent them is between $3,000 and $5,000, and that's at the low end. Legal services are expensive, and the providers are relatively limited. And given that marketplace, the vast majority of people who need attorneys the most don't have access to them at all.
Grace Marketplace is a large, low-barrier housing shelter. We work every day to get people housed. That's what we do. Three Rivers was one of the first folks on board with us in 2014. Because we recognized early on that if somebody didn't have their driver's license, they couldn't get to work. If somebody didn't have their Social Security or their disability or their veterans benefits, then they couldn't pay their rent beyond us getting them housed.
It's important to do work like this and support this kind of entity in our community because it does help people with the basic human needs that they have to be able to participate in our community, to be able to live happy and fulfilling lives.
I think the experience of living in poverty may be the most stressful that anyone can experience. It's a never-ending cycle of different problems popping up every time you try to solve one. The biggest thing that we try to help our clients with is to improve their lives and provide at least some opportunity to exit that cycle.
We want people to not just have their legal issues addressed so that their life can be a little bit easier, but we want people to understand what their rights are and understand how to use the law in a way that is helpful for them going forward.
For a vast majority of people, they don't intersect with the legal system generally, but when they do, it's because they're being sued. They're either being sued because they owe a debt, they are at risk of losing their home to foreclosure, or they're possibly facing eviction from a rental home. There is no guaranteed right of counsel to any lawyer to help you or represent you in those cases. We exist as an attempt to try to resolve that problem and try to give people access to understand the court system, to navigate it more successfully, but also to advocate for their interests and represent them diligently in those cases.
If you are charged with a crime, the state will provide you with a public defender. Okay, if you can't afford an attorney, the state will provide you with one. If somebody rips you off and you need to try to get back your asset, you have to go to a civil. Well, if you believe you cannot afford an attorney, Three Rivers serves that function to provide you with legal counsel. People who fall through the cracks are people who don't know that they have the option to get inexpensive or free legal assistance.
Our attorneys serve around 3,000 to 4,500 different families across a year. We also do a lot of community involvement. We may provide legal information to many people who never need our services beyond that. It can be helpful to them and make sure that they get access to good, reliable legal information to better their own lives.
Our goal is to serve as many clients as we possibly can. We know that we're not even serving 50% of eligible clients just because we don't have the resources to do so. We always want to do whatever we can to provide more services to more clients.
It's important for us to get more attorneys committed to serving. I believe that it is an attorney's responsibility to provide access to the court system and provide access to legal services to everybody. Any attorney who's willing to give time can give time. Give money can give money. But if you're a member of the Florida Bar, you ought to consider being a volunteer.